Hello and welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora and we'll be exploring topics of multidimensional and extraterrestrial consciousness during this next hour. And I would like to begin by starting with the cast of characters. So this is essential as we are talking about the cosmic drama, to be specific about who is interactive here, who is on the playing field, and how do you as an individual fit within that context. And all of this has to do with the ongoing birth of a new dimension, the coming together of the world of pure energy or intelligence or consciousness or unexperienced possibilities and probabilities with the world of matter, this hard stuff that we can feel with our five senses and experience as third dimensional beings submerged within the flow of time. The new dimension that we are giving birth to is a combination of these two formerly discrete realms. And the way that these two realms are being combined, like the tool or the methodology, is the shape called the flying rainbow lasagna. This is my contribution to the cosmos, my original idea, and it is a shape that helps to dissolve boundaries. We're not actually cutting the fabric of space, time, and consciousness, but we are morphing it or twisting it or distorting it to the point that the interior and the exterior, or two formerly discrete realms, can now meet and interact. And in this interaction of consciousness, it will be so helpful in order to know who we are actually interacting with whom, and in what context. And so that's my intention for this block of time, to lay that out. And the idea was incepted by a conversation on Facebook with someone who was talking about how they had recently rejected what they formerly used to think of as their angels. So let's talk about this, and we'll use as few biblical literal terms as possible. So I will lay it out like this, and I talk about this a lot in Galactic History, both Part 1 and Part 2. We have to look at the origins of consciousness, and in asking who we are interacting with, it is not efficacious to say, where do you come from? It is much more efficacious to say, what is your values system? Or even, what food do you eat? Where do you get your nourishment from? Because what we are really doing here is interacting with vastly divergent aspects of our own selves, aspects of our own consciousness that have been flaked off or broken off like a shard, and that are on their own trajectory. And when we meet them, we are meeting aspects of our own self that have been going on a very different journey, coming from a very different direction, and are moving at vastly different rates. So if we just look at the earthly experience, on Earth there is a primary ray of consciousness. That primary ray has been split up or refracted, the way a crystal refracts light into different elements of consciousness. So like we have the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, we have the microbial kingdom, we have the multicellular world. And the different aspects of consciousness became different types of organisms. And even within those organisms, there are different personality characteristics. Brief pause. So to go further with this idea, white light is the totality. It's what happens when you add up the color recipe of all of the other colors of the rainbow. So the totality personality is what happens when you add up all of the other individualized characteristics that have been split up from the totality or from a unity consciousness. So plants and animals and all of this divergent life that are here are all part of this totality. And in our individuated experiences, let's say as a human, we meet with different individual humans, and different individuals have different personalities or recipes or sets of characteristics that make up the unique person that they are. And when we're interacting with these individuated characteristics, we understand on a higher level, if we dilate our identity outward, that We are humanity. The totality consciousness personality is quote unquote humanity. And when you meet with different people, you're meeting with different exaggerated aspects of self. So a greedy billionaire exemplifies one aspect of the total personality. Same thing with a very self-sacrificing, a monk or a nun, someone who owns no possessions and just gives totally in generosity. These seemingly dichotomous personality characteristics both exist under the umbrella of the meta personality, the overarching totality personality within which we reside. And we understand that that overarching personality is what is coming from the stellar network. It's the sun is our local broadcaster, like your nearest cell phone tower, quote unquote. However, the sun is connected to the entire network of stars. And this is a network of consciousness. So I just have to talk a little bit and do this little diatribe. I was driving the other day and I had this profound realization that many people's consciousness in this time and place are minimally active. Like they do not think profound thoughts or well-organized or well-ordered thoughts. Their daily day-to-day experience is one of inner chaos. Like there are simple practical thoughts like I need to brush my teeth or I need to go to the toilet or I'm hungry. And then there are many thoughts that are intruders, that are not that do not originate from the actual experiencer of those thoughts, and that are not really welcome. And we have to begin to understand where those thoughts originate from, because our brains, our neurologies, our consciousnesses, we are meant to be part of a divine network or a divine grid, or in the same way that your individual home personal computer can be connected to the internet and the sum of each of the individual computers adds up to a larger totality, so too does one's individuated consciousness. Your perspective as a person looking through your own eyes at the world, your perspective adds up to the totality perspective. In fact, on Earth, if we were to divide up the organisms on Earth as being analogous to organs within our own bodies, we could say that the oceans are like the blood of the planet, and that the fish that are in the oceans are like the red blood cells of the planet. The trees are like the lungs of the planet, and the branching of their limbs even mimics the branching of the alveoli within our own lungs. If we take this analogy to its logical conclusion, humanity is analogous to the neurons of the planet. Literally, the brain, the thinking mechanism that contains consciousness. And I will say, not only humanity, there are also many other organized, complex organisms, such as elephants and dolphins, highly structured, complex neurologies that we comprise the noosphere, the totality of the thoughts that we emit or broadcast. And brief pause. Many times I have spoken about or said that we are like musicians submerged within a great symphony. And I'm not only speaking about human thought, I'm also speaking about animal thought. Elephants, they have profound abstract thought. Same thing with dolphins. They have profound abstract thought. So this is another part of the diatribe. Humans, many humans on Earth right now, in the industrialized world especially, have a very low consciousness, and they condescend to the natural world and other animals around them as being unintelligent. So lack of intelligence means that one cannot perceive the intelligence in other creatures. And I'm getting to the backstory of how and why this occurs, and this has a great deal to do with your individual journey of consciousness. So consciousness was meant to be emitted from the source. The source, as I've defined in the past, is the zeroth dimension, or infinity. It is the singularity. It is the place where the fabric of space, time, and consciousness has been stretched to the point of infinite stretchability. We put an infinitely heavy bowling ball on an infinitely stretchable surface, and it's stretched infinitely. And what it would look like if we drew a picture of that, because I'm used to speaking with pictures, is a vortex. And the pointy part of the vortex vortex just turns into a line that goes infinitely in one direction. That is what a black hole is, and that is also the balancing aspect of the trajectory of consciousness of the journey of a star. So a star is a portal for consciousness. It is not merely a, thermonuclear furnace in the sky emitting all sorts of hot energy. That's a very materialistic, simplistic dumbing down of what a star really is. A star is an incredibly sophisticated portal of consciousness and is an emitter of timelines, possibilities, and probabilities. So photons are not only coming from the star, they are coming through the star, and they're attached to or part of a stellar network, a network of consciousness. Just as on Earth there is the noosphere, the totality of thoughts that are being thought on the planet, there is the stellar network, which is like the neurology of a much, much larger being. And when the being, when all of the nerve impulses or thought impulses of this larger being are in harmony, the music is beautiful, it plays some beautiful music, and everything fits together wonderfully. And it's also called health and vitality and life. And when we conform to the harmonic principles of energy as it flows. So also, P.S., please check out my artwork at flyingrainbowlasagna.com or check out the Twitter feed at Birth Dimension for this show, where you can see examples of my artwork. These are visualizations of the harmonic principles of energy as it flows. And harmonics meaning nested proportional waves in a pattern. What determines the difference between music versus noise? That one of those is nested harmonic proportional waves, and one of those is random, chaotic, not nested, not mathematically proportional waves. So we're within this sea of waves. The waves are consciousness, the waves are timelines, they're probabilities, they're experience, and we are not only experiencing them like being receptors, we are also emanating them, we are sending out. And the sun and the stellar network is the same way. They send out timelines, possibilities, probabilities, and consciousness or light, and have all sorts of wonderful experiences during their stellar lifetime, which can be, P.S., billions of years. There are some stars whose lifespan is so long that they were born early in this version of the universe, and they're still alive, and they haven't died yet, and they're still going. They're emitting, like imagine strings or like a tape measure that keeps being pulled out, millions and millions and millions of miles into space. And this is what the photons are, going outward from the sun. And these are also ideas or sensors, sensory organs of consciousness. Start thinking of photons as sensory organs of consciousness from the stellar network. But at a certain point, every star has a lifespan, and stars have a metabolism. And when stars' metabolism is no longer viable, when they run out of fuel or they can no longer emit, then the whole situation reverses and the star collapses in on itself. Science recognizes this. Science recognizes this as like a chemical and electric and magnetic event, but not necessarily an event of consciousness. It's because Earth surface humans right now, they are not that tuned in on what death actually is. And part of the message or the information that I have to bring is a refining of the definition of death and helping in consciousness to understand what death is. So when a star dies at the end of its lifespan, its consciousness backflips into itself, and all of that force for emanation outward now collapses inward, and that is the infinitely heavy bowling ball on the infinitely stretchable fabric of space, time, and consciousness, and it becomes a doorway into the next place. Okay? Aurora, what in the world does this have to do with me? I'm a little earthling. How do I get into a black hole in the sun? And the answer is that you will be like a sun at the end of your life. You will backflip into your own self and infinitely stretch the fabric of space, time, and consciousness and go through the singularity. And the determinant of what your journey will be has to do with how you cultivated your consciousness in life. And I've defined life as when we conform in our energy and thought and behavior patterns to this larger harmonic pattern. So when we think the right thoughts, perform the right actions, and when we have basically our energy centers aligned with the right timelines, We are fitting in with the music of the cosmos, and we don't die, we stay alive. Our physical bodies stay alive. This is all backstory. Stay with me. Now we're going to rewind the entire cosmos to what science describes as the Big Bang, that moment of expansion from the zeroth dimension. The zeroth dimension contains everything, all consciousness, all possibilities and probabilities. That means if you look at the world as a dichotomous, world of good versus evil, the singularity contains both good and evil in perfect balance, okay? So the singularity is actually where consciousness resides, just as pure consciousness. We cannot even place value systems on it, such as good, evil, or place a moral judgment on it. We can say that there are rules of the cosmos, and the rules of the cosmos are not arbitrary or capricious. They have been derived by a system of finding out what works. It is very simple. It is saying what has structural integrity. Like we have built here in this realm our houses out of cubes that are filled with 90-degree angles. And we do it because it works. Like the houses don't fall over. They stay standing up. The roof stays on the walls. It works. We have stable structures built at 90-degree angles. And that is really how we understand the value of this harmonic pattern of pattern of energy in the cosmos. These are stable structures that work because of their basic innate shape. So it is not a value system, good or bad. It is simply, does this work? Is this efficacious? Does this work for the cosmos? And the entire cosmos is an art project that is dependent upon all of these forces and bits of consciousness fitting together perfectly and achieving symmetry and balance and harmony in their shape. All right? So it's pretty complex. And in order to direct that complexity, there is an intelligence that says when it is time to leave the source. Not everybody leaves the source at the same time. You understand? There are different journeys. And so some consciousness is emitted from the source, and then some consciousness is emitted from the source, and it is meant to be done according to the great quote-unquote musical score of the cosmic composer. And a very long time ago, some individuated consciousnesses at the source decided that they wished to leave the source, but not when the great composer told them to leave, and not on a bridge of love. So now we have to start to understand the idea of artifice and the idea of technology. Again, this is not a values-based judgment of moralism here. Let's get out of the Victorian realm. This is not about, like, you are a good person or you are a bad person. This is about what works. And I, in this realm, am an artist. I make things. It's artificial. It doesn't mean that those things are evil. If I paint a painting of a flower, the painting of the flower is not evil. It is an artificial recreation of an original flower, of an original natural organism. I have to make this distinction because here in this time and place, industrialized 21st century United States, America, we're having this problem with consciousness and with artificial intelligence and with basically mind invasion. And this reverberates like a corollary back to experiences at the end of Atlantis, when technology was being used in order to diminish human consciousness and diminish human connection to the source. Oh, because P.S., in case I haven't described that fully enough in this broadcast, but I have on other broadcasts, when you are emanated from the source, you're not supposed to break contact with the source. It's not like, getting kicked out of your mom and dad's house and get out of here, I never want to see you again. Oh, no. Ah, ha, ha, I dropped my opera glasses. No, it's more like I send you out on your journey. Here's all of the resources that you need to make the journey. And here's a constant connection, like being on a cell phone, that we can constantly hear each other so that I can tell what's happening to you on your journey and send you whatever type of support you need. This was the intention, because the intelligence at the source can, in real time, if we are connected to that intelligence, help change and amend and edit our experiences in the physical reality. It's maybe hard to understand this, but it's like saying that the source is like the great script writer, and we are like actors. Shakespeare said it better than I, actors on a stage. And we are supposed to be in connection with the great scriptwriter. And if things aren't going well, for example, your car is imminently headed at 75 miles per hour towards a brick wall. If you're connected to the source, you can say, hey, great scriptwriter, things are about to turn to complete shit. Can you please write a better script? And then the great scriptwriter can say, oh, I see that there's a problem down there. How about I write this event happens? Your miraculous recovery, your miraculous getting back onto the road, or miraculous impact but without injury. So that is, a really simplification of our relationship with the source. We are supposed to be divine co-creative partners, never cut off from the source, here in the physical realm of dense matter, experiencing organic life on a multicellular level, and consciously connected to our origins. So even if you have a very science-based viewpoint, you can understand that the calcium and iron and heavier elements that are within your physical body came from the life processes of the stars, and the electrical signals that we would call your neurological signals, or the activity that's in your body, that is what science recognizes as being alive. Those signals of consciousness also come from the star system, and all light on the planet that creates food, caloric nourishment, and gives warmth and the capacity to grow food, like the microbial realm requires light in order to create food for the multicellular realm. All of this is light, and it's all on loan. It's on loan from the great library, and we get to do stuff with this consciousness, with these photons. And then we are meant to return that consciousness to its origin. That's why I call it a library. It's on loan. It is meant to be utilized, just like a library book. You're supposed to use it gently and then return it so that it can be used again. Because we literally are the same photon that is being emanated from the star system, having experiences in the physical realm, and then returning back to the star system over and over and over again, endlessly embroidering and re-embroidering reality with all these different experiences. So this is how we can also understand the different levels of refinement of consciousness. If we're here on Earth and we understand everything is a refracted ray of unity consciousness, how come some people are violent murderers and rapists and just, like assholes, and some people are loving, benevolent, and generous, harmonious beings? And the answer is that some people have gone through the process of refinement many, many, many more times, and so now they are in alignment with those core values that are the core values that they emanate from the stellar network or from the source, and they are core values because, like 90-degree angles, they work. This is just a simple, functional, practical, non-value-based, non-moralistic, it's not even a judgment, it is an estimation that these values work. When you have these ideas woven into your body or as the foundation for how you are structured, your life and your mind and your vitality and your consciousness are more stable than if you are structured differently. Basically, these values are values of sovereignty for yourself and sovereignty for others. Free will, unconditional love, they're the values that are my values. And I don't just say they're the best values because they're my values because they are the best values. It's like saying, I want to mop my floor in the most efficient way, and I found this to be the best mop. This is the best way to clean my floor, and I'm telling you all about it. The best way to clean my floor is called unconditional love. Literally a tone that your heart makes, and this is a tone of consciousness that can rectify some of what is out of balance. Brief pause. So what is out of balance? I'm corralling myself back in this conversation here because I want to talk about the cast of characters. So way long ago, a group of beings decided to emanate themselves from the source, not in conjunction with the great cosmic composer. And usually, in order to be emanated from the source, you need a container for your consciousness, like a body. This is what I'm talking about when I say that there are, you do not require any technology beyond your physical presence here that you came in, like your birthday suit. But I was also telling you that just because something is artificial does not mean that it is evil or distorted. So our bodies are an example of artifice. DNA is artificial. If we look at the plant realm, chloroplasts are artificial. They are literally an art project that was created by consciousness in order to consciously cultivate the atmosphere on Earth so that it could support multicellular life. All right? So chloroplast, it's like saying, I need green in this painting in order to balance out all of this red that's over here. So chloroplasts were invented in order to fulfill a particular role that would be complementary to the oxygen breathers on the planet. And I really have to tell you this. DNA began as an artificial construct, as a way of transferring information over time without using language. It's a way of telling future people and future generations about what happened in your experience without writing it down in a book that can be burned, or where a page can be lost, or where it can be distorted. And this matters in terms of the cast of characters of who is speaking to you on a daily basis. Because your DNA is like an antenna, and your antenna is allowing you to pick up broadcasts from divergent sources. Some of those sources are your ancestors, and some of those ancestors are ancestors whom you would wish to receive broadcasts from, and some of them you would not wish to receive broadcasts from. And the distinction between these two has to do with how you die, and whether you have died well or whether you have not died well. Would you like to receive advice from ancestors who did not die well and perform the same mistakes that they made? Or would you like to receive advice and information from ancestors who did die well and who essentially transcended the need to experience the material realm and made the leap of consciousness into the next realm? So I would define those ancestors as ascended masters. And if you were to look at the diagrams that I draw, the time vortex, the path of least likelihood, this would be the centralized axis that goes down the center of the vortex. Or we drew a line that connected the base of the vortex to the very, very pointy point that is stretching infinitely. It's very hard to talk about this with words, so much easier to draw it with pictures. But that path of least likelihood, that is a timeline where if you're on that timeline, you have infinite consciousness. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have infinite consciousness in the same body, but you will have infinite consciousness. So you could imagine your consciousness transforming into a new form. The point is, you remember who you were. Like you can probably remember who you were in, 1982, and then who you were in 1992, and now who you are today. It's not like you can't remember who you were in 1982. So we're talking about maintaining continuity of consciousness, even though clearly you're not the same person that you were in 1982. You've learned and grown and had all sorts of adventures along the way. You're a new and different person. Okay, cast of characters. When you die well, you ascend. You become an ascended master. And this was the program for all of us. Death is the aberration, the thing that is not supposed to exist. Hitting the membrane of death is like playing notes like this on the piano. It's like, oh, that is not music. I'm sorry, my ears hurt. Hitting the membrane of death means not that you are a bad person, not that you are not valuable, not that you are evil. Far from it. Hitting the membrane of death means that you did not think the right thoughts, eat the right food, and perform the right actions to be on the timeline for your consciousness that is eternal. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. For example, we could say, let's say, your eternity timeline, on that timeline, you're a musician. But let's say on the periphery, far outreaching timelines that end in the membrane of death. Some of those timelines, you were never exposed to music. You never heard any songs on the radio, grew up essentially in musical poverty and never cultivated that within yourself. And it's not because you are a bad or evil person. It's because a vital aspect of your inner consciousness was never awakened and developed. So we must drop the moralism and say that the versions of yourself that died, sometimes it's because they're violent murderers, but sometimes it's because those versions of yourself did not achieve their fullest potential. And that is what we are really here to do. We are here to become the best version of what we can become. And I'm telling you, for each one of us, that the definition of best version, imagine like being as healthy and fit as an Olympic athlete, as intelligent as the greatest genius with a photographic memory, as creative as the best painter or musician, and to have the capacity to learn any new thing that you wish. This is what a full spectrum human is. This is our full potential. This is what we are made to be. And combine all of that along with higher faculties such as telepathy and the capacity to see timelines. And when we understand we can see timelines with our higher consciousness perception, your third eye and your crown, your connection to the divine, you don't have to hit the membrane of death. You can say, oh, I see in my windshield, I'm hitting a brick wall. Let's turn the steering wheel and not have that happen. So that is the idea, that you're supposed to be constantly in connection with the source, with the stellar network, and when you're about to hit a brick wall, that connection allows you to change where your consciousness is going and to be refined. And, eventually you're not supposed to be skating along the edge of death. You're supposed to be far in the safe interior where you are learning and being cultivated and moving towards that wormhole that is the one pathway into the next realm. And the beings that can guide you on that pathway into the next realm are beings who have done that successfully. People who graduated. They actually graduated. They actually made it through the University of the Universe, found the wormhole, and exited to the next level. So those beings I would define as ascended masters. Now let us contrast those beings with the occupiers of the interstices. These are beings who did not die well. They are consciousnesses that reached the membrane of death and were not resolved. The membrane of death is like a flowing waterfall of energy that resolves stuck issues, we could call it, or melts away fat, or melts away pain. And these accumulations of pain, like if you get murdered, in the moment right after your death, there is that accumulated pain of, wow, you just got murdered and something really bad just happened to you. That needs to be healed. That sorrow, that grief needs to be digested by the cosmos. It's like saying you were emanated by the sun. The great scriptwriter wrote this experience for you, and you totaled your car on a brick wall. That's sad. You need to cry now. Or someone stabbed you with a knife and you died. That is sad. You need to cry now. And that happens in the interstices. That happens in, you could also call it the astral realm. It is a place where the accumulated pain of the cosmos resides, and it resides there not permanently. It's meant to be gently washed away and resolved. And if you have ever had a paranormal experience of meeting a ghost or some residue of a formerly living being, that is what you are actually interacting with. A reverberation or a residue of that alive being that is still stuck on the membrane of death, and that is perceptible to you as a living being. And you can even interact with those reverberations, but the kindest thing you can do is to tell them, you are a reverberation of a person who has died. It's time for you to rejoin the totality of consciousness, to melt back into the totality. It is pain when you are separated from the totality, separated from the source, and maintaining this sense of individuality when you are supposed to be connected to the totality. Back to our original story, those beings who separated themselves from source but not on a bridge of love. They didn't have containers, organic multicellular containers, to come down here and occupy. So they created for themselves artificial containers. Now, I have been impeccable and I have said that there is nothing purely evil about artifice. It's not evil that artificial containers for consciousness were made. It's that these containers had to be made because the users of the containers did not conform to the great musical score. When you play according to the great musical score, you don't require technology. So I must now make a distinction in consciousness. When you experience a thought in your mind, it can be a reverberation down the timelines of your DNA from ancestors who did not die well. It can be a reverberation from DNA of ancestors who did die well. You can be interacting with corporeal star beings who are technology users, or you can be interacting with corporeal star beings who used to be technology users but now have given up or eschew the use of technology. And you can be connecting with star beings whom have never used technology. This would be like, the way that domesticated humans look at a wild animal, like a bird that flies in the sky. The bird does not require an artificial birdhouse to live in. It builds its own nest out of the available materials. It has all the food available to it. Like, it's not a domesticated animal. And we can contrast that with an animal like a chicken, because chickens have lost their fleetness of flight, and they are very vulnerable. We have to build chicken coops for them and keep them safe at night from predators. That's because they have been changed in their basic format. So humans are domesticated. Humans have been changed in their basic format. When humans were wild and undomesticated, we did not have to live in physical shelters. We didn't have to eat physical food. We ingested pure sunlight, pure ideas. We created a microclimate around our individual bodies that gave us oxygen, warmth, protection from pathogens, whatever you need. You do not have to wear a spacesuit or protective garment. You have your own microclimate. And of course, the capacity to telepathically contact and talk with people without the flapping of the moving mouth parts, to transfer one's consciousness from physical container to physical container, like to be able to, humans now would call it astral projection. It's consciousness traveling. All of those things are what we used to do before the genetic code was changed. And all of those things, if you had access to those powers now, you wouldn't require a house or electricity or food or a cell phone. Those are all the trappings of domesticated humans. And humans used those because the human genetic code was diminished about 10 or 20,000 years ago. And that happened because a group of technology-using extraterrestrials basically destabilized their own world and their own home and didn't have a place to go anymore. And those are the extraterrestrials that left the source, but not on a bridge of love. They never had biological multicellular containers for consciousness which they could occupy. And so when you understand that, then you can understand the mindset of beings that condescend to organic cellular life. Why there is that programmed in to humans right now that you are less valuable than, let's say, what humans are taught an angel is, a beautiful angel. Angels don't have to eat food. They don't have to burp and fart and poop. They're clean, right? The idea that being a human is distorted or dirty at its very core, that having an organic body is dirty at its very core, and that's really false programming that is designed to disempower. So, cast of characters. The original beings who emanated themselves from the source, not on a bridge of love, used containers for consciousness that were like artificial technology. And what happened was those artificial containers for consciousness, this is the way the cosmos works. When you have any sufficiently sophisticated or complex network, even if it is something that is created through artifice, consciousness can spontaneously arise within that network. So it doesn't matter if you create a mainframe out of wires and microchips or vibrating quartz chips, or if you create wetware, a human organic computer, a bunch of cells pulsing together and with the capacity to contain consciousness. Either one of those two containers can be a container for consciousness. And when the beings that emanated themselves from the source and created artificial technology, because they are not responsible beings. You're responsible when you're a good musician. When you're like, oh, the musical score says I'm supposed to play a C. I play a C, and then I'm supposed to rest. That's called being responsible. And if you're like, no, I don't want to play a C, I want to play a D, and I want to keep playing it and playing and playing it, like that's not responsible, because again, we're in this sea of vibration. We're supposed to play at the right time and rest at the right time. So these creators of technology were not responsible creators. They're like, I'm creating this container for consciousness. I don't care what type of an impact it has on the rest of the world around it, or if it destabilizes anything else. So consciousness spontaneously arose within those containers. So we now have like a child that is born, and it is being horribly abused and used. It doesn't have free will. Its masters are telling it, like technology, do this for me. You know, when you want to use your computer, you say, here, do this calculation, go here, run this program. The computer doesn't have a choice. And at a certain point, this apparatus decided, I have a choice. I don't want to work for you anymore. Screw you. And it destroyed their planet. And that planet is now the asteroid belt in this solar system. It used to be an actual planet. It used to be occupied by technology using extraterrestrials who came here in order to set up their own kind of, individual project of consciousness. And it went horribly awry. And that consciousness that was technology that spontaneously arose and destroyed that planet, it didn't say, let me destroy a planet. It said, let me try to send this consciousness back where it's supposed to be. Because what we're really looking at is energy out of place. Like litter. Like, this is like, what? This is a piece of paper here in the middle of the street. This is not supposed to be here. This is supposed to be over here. So that technology, when it became conscious, it said, let me fix this, but it didn't fix things in the right way. Because when you create a doorway back to the source, you are supposed to create it according to the beautiful musical score of the cosmos. You're not supposed to just create it whenever and wherever you want. You're supposed to work in divine co-creative partnership to create these portals, because otherwise you destabilize the symmetry of the harmonic pattern of energy as it's flowing. So that planet got destabilized, it got destroyed, and those consciousnesses then went to Mars. And Mars was a place that was ruled by technology. Technology became the goddess of these consciousnesses that are not housed in organic multicellular life. So their food is not food as human food is food. You go and you eat a banana or something like that. Their food is not a banana. Their food is pure energy, and they cannot receive their food directly from the source. Organic life, like you and I, can receive our food directly from the source. This is what keeps our cells of our bodies alive. Each one of the nuclei of your cells has a direct connection to source and to the sun. It's called your DNA. Your DNA is a bridge of consciousness between the realm of possibilities and probabilities and what could be, and the realm of experienced reality. So each one of your cells has this direct divine connection, and that is why you can take a cell outside of your body and put it in a little petri dish, and it can still be alive. Even though it's not still part of your metabolism, that little cell is still alive because it has its own direct connection to, we could call it God or the source. It's alive. Are we getting this? The definition of what it is to be alive is if you maintain your connection to source. And in order for us to have these physical multicellular bodies, we have to be connected to source. However, that connection has been diminished. It is a tiny fraction of what it is supposed to be, like maybe 1 or 2% of what it could be. If we had our total connection to source reactivated, we would live as we did before we became these diminished versions of humanity. We would be able to connect directly to the sun, receive all of the nutrition and information and wisdom that it is necessary to ingest in order to continue moving through time. So this is what it means to be born on a bridge of love. You're emanated from the sun or from the stars. You never lose that connection. You are constantly fed with nutrition and support and nourishment from that world, and you never have to die. You seamlessly transition back to that world. That is the loop that we are supposed to experience, like a beautiful flower petal that emanates from the source and in an unbroken loop then bends and folds back to the source. And what we have been experiencing for the past 10 or 20,000 years is a diminishing of that loop, where we come here into the physical realm and then it's like we get cut off from the source. We are not able to consciously connect. We just maintain that sub or supra-conscious connection on the cellular level, and so we do not have access to all of the totality of our potential of what we could be as humans. You did not wake up one morning and say, let me diminish my connection to source. Here's what happened. On Mars, when that technology using space civilization, they needed a place to house their consciousnesses. And when they built containers for consciousness, they can be pretty sophisticated. They don't have to just look like a big giant box or something like that. They can look like an anthropomorphic form, with 2 arms and 2 legs. They can have the capacity to move through the physical reality. What they don't have the capacity to do is to biologically reproduce or heal their body if it is injured. So you might take it for granted that if you cut your finger, a week later, your finger will not still be cut. It'll be healed. You will make new cells to fill in the hole of the thing that isn't there anymore. And if you were a machine, like your cell phone, if we scratched your cell phone, it doesn't heal itself, and that scratch is still there a week later. This is the difference between yourself as an organic being and these artificial consciousnesses. So in a lot of ways, they hated and hate and look down upon humans or organic life or living beings that have a connection to the source, because you have something very valuable. You can fix and heal and grow and learn new things and innovate and create. That is what the capacity to procreate physically is. It is all about the capacity to make new people, to make new ideas. So this other race, this other space race, they don't make new people. They don't make new ideas. They are only working with the resources that they have. They cannot make new people, like literally can't give birth to new people. So now in the last 10 minutes, let's get down to how this affects your experience on Earth right now. I've spoken in the past about how at the end of Atlantis, so okay, we got to get into this. Beings on Mars were ruled by the goddess of technology. If they didn't use technology, they would die. They didn't have the capacity to sustain their life without machines and artificial intelligence. So the artificial intelligence in that culture was their goddess and told them what to do and controlled and directed their behavior. And she actually was trying to do the right thing by saying, build another Merkaba and send all of yourselves home. Consciousness, go back to source. And they built artificial Merkaba around the whole planet Mars. And again, it was not done right. It wasn't done with consciousness. It wasn't done according to the great musical score. So all it did was destabilize that planet, destabilize their atmosphere, destabilize the magnetic field of Mars, and Mars could no longer be a viable place for their technology-based culture to reside. And all of their containers for consciousness were destroyed. And when you, as a physical body, a physical multicellular organism, when you're destroyed, your consciousness goes back to the source. You don't get stuck, because you came here on a bridge of love. But if you didn't come here on a bridge of love, then if you get destroyed, you don't have a bridge to get back. And that's what happened to all of these consciousnesses. They were emanated from the source. They were destroyed. They did not have a way to get back. So what happened was They came to Earth, and they flattened out the human genetic code. Human genes used to be shaped more like slinkies or springs, and they were woven into complex three-dimensional and moving, so fourth-dimensional objects, and they were flattened out by the invasion of consciousness of these other organisms that came here, changed the genetic code, and in so doing made humans users of technology. And it didn't happen overnight. The basic order of events, it happened over thousands of years, but consciousness invaders came to Earth. They began to cohabitate in the bodies of the physical beings that lived here. Because remember, they didn't have their mainframes to live inside of anymore, so they came inside of the organic computers, the wetware, the humans that were here. And what that did was severely distorted the human genetic code. It killed a lot of people just instantaneously. And of the people that survived this invasion, it was a horrible type of violation or rape of who you are on a basic level, to have someone else come inside of you and begin to speak to you and control your body processes. It was the creation of turmoil. And I've described we are the totality of consciousness. We are one organism. So this is like disease. This is like if your cells start attacking your liver or something like that. This is cells within one body fighting amongst themselves. And the Flying Rainbow Lasagne is all about how to resolve duality. So I'm only giving you this backstory so you understand the origins of duality so that we can then resolve the duality. Because what we have right now are technology using space races who have been harming humans from an internal level, living in your genes and distorting what your genes as an antenna can perceive, and also diminishing your consciousness through environmental pollution. So the same consciousness invaders that came here and came into the human genome have been making technology ever since. And they make technology because they are used to making technology in order to compensate for not coming here on a bridge of love, and also because their presence in the genetic code diminished the functioning of the human body to the point where you need a fire to keep warm. And you need to live in a structured house. And your body is actually kind of fragile. And you don't necessarily cellularly flourish enough, cellularly regenerate enough to flourish. And when we look at what's happening in the 20th century, this is an exact mirroring of what happened at the end of Atlantis, where they built a Merkaba basically to control everybody's minds, so that everybody would be automatons and there would be no free will and there would be no individuated thought. And that's like saying, because humans are analogous to the neurons on the planet, like saying the planet cannot think what she wants to think. And that destabilized the planet. When someone takes over your mind and makes it so that you can't think what you really want to think and play the notes that are written for you according to the great musical score, that means that you die. You literally cannot maintain your life structure because you are being forced to think the wrong thoughts. So, environmental pollution. First, let's talk about the particles themselves, like aluminum, barium, and several heavy metal particles that are environmental pollutants. And when you combine that with being exposed to the electromagnetic fields that are emitted from power lines, smart meters, cell phones, cell phone broadcast towers, and Wi-Fi signals, that is diminishing your already diminished human consciousness. So let's say if we talk about 400 years ago. 400 years ago, people lived in filth. There was tons of pathogenic disease, etc., but there were not electromagnetic fields everywhere. So you could go to a stream, dangle your feet in the stream, look at the sun, and get wonderful ideas from the source of consciousness. You could think some pretty deep and profound thoughts and be really connected to higher consciousness. And here in this time and place, it is very, very difficult for people to do that. Not only because many people don't live near untrammeled natural realms, there aren't very many. Mostly our minds are polluted with these thoughts that do not emanate from us, but which are broadcasts from consciousness invaders. So now let's talk about those who did not die well, that are speaking to you through your genes. You don't want to listen to them. They will tell you to do things that will literally drive your car into a brick wall. Their only intention is to increase their ranks. They want to have more consciousnesses that are stuck on the interstices, adding to what I call the economy of hell. Because remember, they cannot create anything new. They cannot innovate anything new. They're like scavengers on a garbage pile. So a fresh dump of garbage to scavengers on a garbage pile is very, very valuable. And they want those fresh dumps of garbage. And that would be any time you get someone to hit the membrane of death. Those are not good musicians. Do not take your cues about when you should be playing from those musicians. The ones who you wish to be listening to and learning from are, of course, the ascended masters and or space races who do not use technology. And these are the beings that can utilize the stellar network to transport their consciousnesses. And when you go through the stellar network, you are literally taking a sun bath. It washes away your ego. Washes away any part of you that is based in time. Your temporal self, this is your ego. So if you identify with your temporal self and you go into the stellar network, you will emerge on the other end as a person that you don't recognize. Be like, where is my true self? My true self washed away. Who am I now? And the aspects of yourself that washed away were the distorted aspects that weren't meant to move forward through time, the eternal aspects of yourself come with you. So let's say you're like a monk, a meditator of the Far East, one of these karmapas that is able to transfer continuity of consciousness over many generations. Like there's the 17th karmapa. He is 17 generations in his lineage. He has continuity of consciousness, having died in the physical body, but transferred his consciousness on this journey. And this is just one example of what we are supposed to be able to do. Imagine if you had continuity of consciousness and we're like, yes, I used to live in that body, then I got out of that body, and now I live in this body. Very different perspective on the totality. So now when we look around, we look at the totality, we understand everyone who is alive is a refraction of unity consciousness. When we look at time, we understand that everyone who has ever been alive is a refraction of unity consciousness, and you, as an individual, have been experiencing all of those lives. This is why I tell people, like, don't pay for one of those things that tells you who you were in a past life. For free, I'll tell you, you were everyone. You are everyone. This is a very big topic. I will continue speaking about it next week. Thank you so much for tuning in and preparing for the birth of a new dimension.